Good evening. This is Frank Nelson presenting my Module 7 Putting It All Together presentation through Screencast-O-Matic. On display right now is a bubble I prepared at the Bubble website. Bubble is an app that was reviewed by my classmate Gina, and I decided to give it a try. To be candid, I've been kind of skeptical of online education and the success or the effectiveness of it. But I've kind of come to realize that, as with classroom teaching or other kinds of teaching, online teaching can be done well or it can be done poorly. And that in the case of a brick and mortar classroom or an online classroom, good teaching practice is good teaching practice. I think a couple common themes. First, students now don't want a teacher-centered classroom. They want a student-centered classroom. They don't want a lecturer. They want a facilitator, a partner in the classroom. And I think that's true in both online classes and regular classes. In my flowchart here, I've kind of described my online class that I teach. From the Rice text in a table on page 5, I realized that I'd be looking to teach a facilitated cohort class where students start and end together. My subject area, my degree is in chemistry, so I'd need to teach a chemistry class. And I was thinking of maybe a unit on chemical reactions, the types of reactions and balancing equations, things like that. Before we get into content and what students would do, in order to create a class like this, I found that the Rice text was very helpful and did a really good job of preparing checklists and parting out the process of doing tasks that would have to be done, both preparing for a class and also during presenting the class, assessing the class, all those kind of things. I particularly like the preparation checklist for teachers on page 41, the classroom preparation list on page 95, and the course outline readiness checklist on page 181. I thought they were useful tools. As far as content preparation, the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines, I found that eye-opening, particularly in preparing this presentation. I found this table where it kind of optimized and condensed all that information in a real nice, neat package. But on the main web page that I first looked at, I really liked the fact that there were links to examples that were really helpful in trying to figure out what should be done and how to do it. Oops. Let's get back to our module. All right. The Online Accessibility Handbook. I found that really useful too, and looking at how the things that I've been doing are or are not accessible to people with disabilities. And interestingly, I think in the Rice text, they're kind of inconsistent with their tables and how they present them. I mean, if they were Word documents, some of them would be kind of hard or have limited accessibility. So I think they're a little inconsistent, some of those. So let's get back here to our flowchart. In lesson planning, I found that the learner-centered attributes lesson plan example on page 36 and 37 are very helpful. And the differentiated design and instruction lesson plan was, to be candid, different than any other differentiated instruction plan I'd ever seen before. And I thought that was really useful. Some best practice ahas. I have other ahas, but the best practice ahas for myself were common errors when conducting discussions. I found that I was guilty of a couple of them when I do my discussions, such as answering my own questions sometimes, and not following up when I should. Another best practice AHA is managing collaborative activities. I cut off the link here, but I think that was on page 130 in the RICE text. As far as my unit would be concerned, I was thinking, like I said, of a chemical reactions unit, and synchronous activities would have to be, maybe in the learning management system, whatever my school offered, or using Google Hangout and Google Drives for some synchronous activities. We would have types of reactions, discussions, presentations on how to balance equations. As far as small group activities, you could use a Google Hangout to do a collaborative lab. Students could do examples of chemical reactions with chemicals from home, or also they could be working together on balancing equations, working on sheets, practice problem sets. For asynchronous activities, a help board for posting questions. Also, asynchronous activities could be YouTube or Khan Academy videos or interactions with getting tutoring when the teacher's offline. For synchronous activities, like I said, I think it's important that each person in a group activity or a small group activity be assigned a role or a portion of the activity that they're responsible for, and that there be some kind of defined product that they'll be producing as far as paperwork or records of the activity, pictures, video log, whatever that might be. But everyone has to have a contribution, a role, and a product that they're going to be turning in. As far as asynchronous activities, first of all, as far as assessing the synchronous activities, you want to be looking at those things, what their role is and what their product was that they turned in, and provide a rubric for what the expectation is for it. For asynchronous activities, the main point that is made about the difference between synchronous and asynchronous is this idea about, the benefit of asynchronous activities is that you have time for reflection and digestion and processing and synthesis of new ideas. And so your assessment, or my assessment, would need to include a portion of it looking for that kind of growth, that kind of digestion and reprocessing of the information, and so that the output or the product of the student shows that reflection and growth in it. As far as my role in the classroom, I mentioned earlier, the kind of teacher I would want to be is a teacher who is a facilitator, a resource, a mentor, and to be candid, not a lecturer, not a teacher-centered teacher. My style has been like the style of the teachers that taught me in that time when teacher-centered education was the model. But I am working hard to create a student-centered classroom in my brick-and-mortar classroom, and I would do the same in my online classroom. The social presence model data shows that both teachers and students here, 96% and almost 97% of teachers and 91% of students say instructor involvement is important or very important. But the involvement that they want is they want a facilitator, they want a mentor, they don't want a lecturer. And so this 91% is important, but it's important that you provide that instruction in the mode that they want it and will accept it and need it. The online classroom has many of the same kinds of issues that a regular classroom has, a brick-and-mortar classroom has. Students off task, evading participation, and so the learning management system that I would be provided with would have to have tools that would allow interaction. In some of the early videos we saw where teachers had students check in repeatedly with emojis or check marks or red X's or green check marks or whatever, in order to help them establish participation and also keep the students involved as part of the process, and give them individual attention according to what the comments and the emojis they're registering. Also, I think is important here is that the effective association as the emotional link to the group in the online classroom. Almost 3 in 5 students said it was important or very important, and that they viewed the class as a community so that they're a stakeholder as part of it. Almost 2/3 of the students registered that was important to them. I think it's obvious that teachers would think that's important, but the fact that more than a majority of the students, almost 2/3 of them, think that that's important, tells us that it is an important fact for establishing a healthy community of learners in your online classroom. As I mentioned at the outset, I was a little bit of a skeptic, even though my very first experience with online learning was a synchronous class from Cal State Long Beach to my little dirt high school out in the desert in northern Los Angeles County, where kids took an art class or the marine biology class online with a little Blackboard synchronous learning management system. And I was impressed with it back in 2002 or whenever that I first experienced it. But, I kind of been watching students in these asynchronous classes where they're just reading and checking multiple choice boxes and things like that. And I think my opinion kind of was degraded from that. But I found the content and the examples and the schools that we've examined during this class time illuminating, and I'm actually at the point where I think maybe as a part-time job down the road or something like that, or maybe in semi-retirement, I might consider doing it, because with the modern technology and tools, I think it could actually be done effectively, and as well as what's happening in my classroom in McCaskey High School. Thank you very much.